So, it's great to see so many of you here, and it's great to know that even more of you are here and looking at this very important lecture here by our distinguished guest, Dr. Professor, whatever, Mitchell Stevens here from Stanford. VINNOVA, which you know is the Swedish innovation agency, we have since about a year the great privilege of having one of our co-workers located in Stanford due to the very kind efforts here from the Wallenberg Foundation. And our co-worker and lead guard, who is located there since August last year, she introduced me and my colleague Sylvia to Professor Stevens here about 2 months ago when we visited California. And this presentation that we will listen to here today is about how Stanford is utilizing new media to enhance and improve their education system. And even though that is a little bit outside of the scope of VINNOVA, we thought that this is such a great opportunity for us to really learn from what is happening over there, because education and how we are forming that is of key importance for the future here in Sweden. And that's why I'm extremely happy to see that we were able to get you here today, Professor Mitchell Stevens, and I'm now going to do a very short introduction to who you are, but I think you better fill out the details later. But you are part of something that is called ScanCore, and that is the Scandinavian Consortium for Organizational Research. So I know that you are doing a lot of research about how the innovation system looks in Scandinavia, so maybe you are even a larger expert on VINNOVA than what we are. Yeah, okay. We need all the help that we can get. But that is only sort of part of your job. You're also director of Stanford's Digital Research and Planning, and it's in that role that you will give the lecture here today for all of us here. So then please give the word to you, and we look forward to a very interesting lecture about what you are doing over there, and hope that we can learn a little bit from you here. Thank you.
Is it on? Is that what you want? It's kind of loud though, right? You can turn down the, well, you guys will figure that stuff out, right? Thank you, Charlotte. I feel like I'm on television and live at the same time. I guess maybe that's what it is. Welcome to the digital future. It's a real honor to be here. I'm a sociologist. I trained at Northwestern University in the 1990s, and it was in that work that I came to learn of just how important Sweden's role has been in the creation of what we call modernity in the 20th century. Sociologists in the United States have looked with envy at the way in which Sweden organizes its education and the rest of its welfare systems. And more recently, I have served, as Charlotte said, as director of the Scandinavian Consortium for Organizational Research, which is, in fact, an entity that's more yours than mine. ScanCore is a not-for-profit organization registered in Denmark. Our European address is the Copenhagen Business School, and ScanCore is supported by contributions from its charter members, Sweden, Finland, Norway, and Denmark, and then associate members in continental Europe. And for 25 years, the primary business of ScanCore has been to facilitate organizational social science, both at Stanford and in the Nordic world. And it has been a crucial institutional vehicle for the kind of social science that I do. I'm a student of organization, which means that I place priority on organizations as units of analysis rather than individuals. So this tradition is agnostic about the role of individuals in creating organizational systems, and it prioritizes the institutional character of social life. And this strand of social science has been especially fertile in Stanford and in the Nordic world, I think in large measure because of the great respect that you placed on formal organization generally. You still think it's okay to have a national state in Sweden. We're not sure about that in the United States at present. So that's another way in which I've come to appreciate the scale of your intellectual and organizational ambitions. I've been talking with Anne several times since she arrived in September, and as many of you may know, Sweden in particular's links with Stanford University are long and deep and varied. And so that's another sort of tradition that I inherit or have the opportunity of contributing to, hopefully in some way. So I told you I'm a sociologist. I told you I'm not a complete stranger to the Scandinavian world. I told you that, I didn't tell you that I'm a student of higher education. So I've been studying universities for about 12 years now. I'm interested in how universities feed themselves with money and students and academic talent and political legitimacy. And if you're in the United States, you have to feed your university with football and water polo players as well. You know, why it is that football and intercollegiate sports is such an essential feature of American higher educational life is one of the questions that I've been trying to spend some time figuring out in recent years. And I'm specifically interested in the changing organization between universities and national states. Between 1945 and 1990, the United States built the largest and arguably most productive higher education system to date in world history. It did that largely through federal and state government largesse. And it did that in large measure because universities did a lot of work for the US national state and its geopolitical interests during the Cold War. So the university that I work in, the officially private Stanford University, was built in large measure by the federal and state governments. And it was built in large measure because the Stanford University was presumed to be of service to the nation and the US national interest in the world. Well, the Cold War ended, and there have been a fundamental reorganization of the way in which higher education is funded in the United States. And now places like Stanford and Harvard and the University of California at Berkeley and Michigan and all the other of the perhaps 25 universities that you may have heard of in the United States now claim to be of service to the world. And they seek clients and patrons all over the world. But they still enjoy elaborate dispensations from government in the United States, which raises a very large sort of organizational as well as an ethical question. If places like Stanford are of service to the world, then why do they get special dispensations from government? Why is the 8,000 acres of prime real estate that Stanford occupies between San Francisco and San Jose tax exempt, for example? And what does it mean in any part of the world to have a global university? What is the proper relationship between, say, Aalto University and the Finnish national state as Aalto becomes more officially independent of the Finnish state? Those are the kinds of questions that I was asking when I moved to Stanford from New York University in 2010. And I had a research program that I was comfortable with and was enjoying. And about 18 months ago, my world changed. My own life world changed. Stanford University changed substantially. And what had been a gradual reorganization of US higher education over the last 20 years, which I'll tell you very briefly about kind of ramped up to warp speed. That is and the last 14 months you may have read about some of that warp speed activity. We have new words in our vocabulary now: MOOC, flipped classroom, and we have new entities in the United States, well, they're now global, that didn't exist 2 years ago and that are exerting great influence on the organization of higher education in the US. Coursera, Udacity, Class2Go. So I want to give you a sense today of I want to give you a very brief sense of the way in which the political economy of higher education in the United States has shifted over the last 20 years. I'll do that very briefly, but I do want to spend some time with that because I want you all to have a sense of how peculiar the political economy of US higher education is, and how globally, and how ripe it is for very rapid change at this moment. So I think that will give you a context of about the sense of urgency that I have and that many of my colleagues in the United States have about building an architecture, a research architecture for digital learning that might have a fighting chance of keeping up with the pace of organizational and political change that we're seeing in US higher education. Thankfully, that this moment has a great deal of intellectual and, I think, ethical opportunity for people who are interested, who are serious about higher education, and serious about improving higher education, and serious about understanding and providing higher education as a public good. So, as we say in English, the sky is not falling. The ground is shifting underneath higher education very rapidly in the United States, I think globally as well, but in a different way. And I think we have enormous opportunity to do some very interesting things as researchers and educators. So, that's my two-part ambition. Maybe I could first get a sense of who you are, and people in our television audience, right, could get a sense of who's in the room. Is that possible, gentlemen? Okay. This one, let's just have me say your name and your institutional home, and perhaps what brings you here today, if you'd like to say that. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Karin Strid and I work here at VINNOVA. And I'm especially interested in this because I signed up for a Coursera course that will start in 3 weeks.
Very good.
So I'm very curious about what your experience so far.
What are you taking?
Introduction to Psychology.
Do you know what institution is providing the course?
It's University of Toronto.
Toronto.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
My name is Eva Lindenkrona. I'm working for VINNOVA. I have an IT background as a researcher and teacher in IT. And I have been doing some work for Stiftelsen, a Swedish foundation, on net-based learning.
Okay, my name is Anneli Andersen and I'm a senior lecturer in education in Skövde University. And we have some open courses and we want to have more of them. So.
Very good. I guess you could have handed her the microphone too.
Right, thanks.
I just wanted to be involved somehow.
Ingrid Sundström and I'm heading the administration office for the Wallenberg Foundations. And we have
for the Wallenberg Foundation,
yes.
You say? Very good.
So we've been present at Stanford for a very long time.
Yes, I understand.
And we also support a lot of learning and education projects.
My name is Olof Ugander. I work with innovation research and industry development at the government offices. I'm also a MOOC student. I took a course in history, which was given by Princeton University this past fall.
What was the course?
In history. It was a history course from about 1600 until present
Was
day.
it Jeremy Edelman's
Yes.
class? He's amazing.
Yeah, he was
amazing.
fantastic.
Yeah.
My name is Marianne Granfeldt, and I'm the Secretary General of the Association of Swedish Higher Education. And I think this thing with MOOCs and online education and open educational resources are a very interesting issue for higher education in Sweden. So it's good to be here to hear what you have to say.
Good to meet you.
My name is Mats Edvardsson, academic registrar at the University of Gothenburg, and I'm here for the same reason as Marianne, to have something more to reflect upon due to MOOCs and online education and so on.
We have many ScanCore visitors from Gothenburg over many years. Yeah.
I'm Kristina Persdotter, and I work for the Social Democratic Party in the government, in the parliament. And I'm here to learn more, and also need to learn about what we need to do policy-wise to be able to increase the learning in the digital area.
Very good.
Peter No with VINNOVA as well. Happened to be at Stanford last week and spoke to Ann about this topic a couple of times. 4 different MOOCs, 4 different platforms at this time. Complexity run by...
You're taking 4 different MOOCs on 4 different platforms.
I'm taking 4 to understand the
That's
4
the
different
best way to do it.
platforms.
Good. Yeah, good.
Complexity, statistics, behavioral economics, and a physics course.
Are you taking them now?
Yes.
Is it?
Do I look tired?
You have some insight? Anything early insights on platforms that you like the best, or that you find most interesting? Or
yes, but I don't know if this is the time to share it.
Oh, okay.
If you want, I can.
We
briefly.
can do that later.
Briefly, it's really interesting to understand the self-hosted stuff. Santa Fe runs their own, and they pledge money during the course, and you get insight into the economies of running this. Duke runs on top of Coursera, and they're very meticulously understanding classy operations and tailored towards being able to charge for the stuff. And then I know that you guys are going to join edX to be, or hoping to, or possibly considering.
Yes and no.
Whatever. Okay.
But I like that you said that, because there's a really good story in there. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just stop there.
No. Tell me what you do. Your own work here. You're at VINNOVA.
I'm at VINNOVA. I'm currently working with completely different stuff, but this is an important area. And I have a long relationship with San Francisco, so that's why I happen to talk to Anne about it.
Good. I'll look forward to talking some more.
My name is Ulf Olsson. I'm working at the Knowledge Foundation, but I'm also a researcher at Stockholm University.
Yes.
And as a researcher, I'm interested in MOOCs and especially the openness of this kind of education, and in relation to the company and how to combine the thinking of open educational resources and open learning, and how that fit together with the company's research and so on.
Very good.
Olle Fogel, and I'm also from the Knowledge Foundation, or the KK Foundation, which was said earlier this afternoon. And in general, this foundation support cooperation between academy and industry, and that could be either research or competence development. And then, of course, flexible learning and digital solution is very interesting. So that's...
We're both in the right place, I guess.
Yes.
Good. Nice to meet you.
And my name is Lennart Bernhardsson, and I'm from University West, where I'm a lecturer in digital media. And I love to hear what you can tell us about.
And Lennart was instrumental in
MOOCs.
getting our PowerPoint to work. It was a team effort, all 4 of us. Yep.
My name is Claes Herman Lundgren. I work at the Association for Public and Science in Sweden, and we're very interested in how this will shift the development and the perspective between the public and science and education in between.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm Charlotte Brogren, Director General of VINNOVA, and I got so enthusiastic about your speech when I visited you 2 months ago, and that's why I invited you to come here.
Lucky me.
My name is Leif Kallenholm, and I work at VINNOVA. I'm responsible for the internal questions, including human resources and IT. So this is an opportunity to meet the real world.
Very good. The real world. Where is that real world? I keep looking for it.
Yeah. Göran Marklund, I'm head of operational development division here at VINNOVA, and I've been contaminated by the enthusiasm by my director. But I'm very interested in your first part of the story, what we can learn from the dynamics and performance, possible competitiveness of the US system, and also the way you may improve it through the digital measures.
Very good.
So we'll be very interested.
My name is Eva Malmström. I'm the Deputy President of KTH, Royal Institute of Technology, which is the largest technical university in Sweden.
Yes.
So we are just about to launch a project on how we can improve in this area. So we're really ready to take on the challenge from all universities around the world. So I'm really looking forward to what you're going to say this afternoon.
Very good.
I'm Sigrid Karlsson, Vice Chancellor of University of Skövde. Part of our education programs are in flexible learnings, so we are very keen on having high quality in distance learning or flexible learnings or MOOC, whatever, because that is the key to success, both for us but for a lot of universities around the world. So I'm really interested to see and maybe shake about the challenges with learning in a digital era, actually.
Very good.
My name is Maria Landgren, and I'm working here at VINNOVA as one of the chief strategists. And for me personally, you will open a new area for me, which I'm not very familiar with, so I really look forward to that.
And this is part of my presentation. Let's make the apparatus apparent, as the feminist theorists say. And introduce yourself, please.
I'm Richard Gutarsky. I'm currently building up this live streaming company. I have a former background in academics. I started 10 years ago a quest about, because of my marketing perspective on schools, and I gave up 7-8 years ago. So currently I'm working on the bigger question is how to create the best start in life for those who used to call kids.
Yes,
the best
exactly.
point is now, without a school. Because I think school is dead, and I like Dale Stevens. And
did you know that I wrote a book on the home education movement in the United States?
No, but I'm going to check that out. It's not home education, it's different.
I know that.
We need to.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay, good. Is that enough?
Yeah, unless you want more. No. Okay.
I'm Henrik Katarski, brother to this guy over here.
Truly?
Yes.
What do you know?
Yeah, what do you know? We sound slightly like each other. Yeah. And I'm out photographing and listening to everything beautiful you have to say. It's very interesting.
Very good.
I'm learning a lot.
Please participate.
I will.
You already are participating.
Yes, we are.
Participate more if you want. Great. And to everyone joining us in a digitally mediated way, delighted that you're joining us. I think let me make this a sort of small assignment, because I think what we're experiencing right now in various ways is a nice picture of the moment that we are at in the evolution of instruction, shall we say, or learning. Let's call it learning, like that. I want you to think about the collective investment that, those of you who are in the room with me, think about the collective investment that was required for us all to be in the same place at the same time, having this physically co-present experience. And those of you who are joining us through digital mediation, think about the costs that you didn't pay in order to participate in this activity the way that you are, and think about the things that you're not getting as well as the things that you are getting by joining us through digital media rather than being physically present. also, those of us who are in the room, think about the apparatus that's required for this to happen, right? The physical experience of speaking to you is a different thing now, right? It's got one of these, and one of these, and a bunch of those, and a whole component of division of labor and equipment that really does change what happens in any particular classroom. What is here? What is being physically what is being here, and what are the different ways in which that happens? And how much does it cost to be here in various ways? And what might be done analytically with the ongoing stream of data that is being accumulated through your web platform while I'm talking to you? What could we do with that scientifically? All right, so two parts to my story. The first story is about that I started already with my opening remarks, is the changing the political economy of U.S. higher education. There are over 4,000 post-secondary institutions in the United States, about 4,200 total. You haven't heard of the vast majority of them. When people think about the excellence of American higher education, they think about perhaps 24 universities that are major centers for research that often but not always have very large endowments. Since I moved to Stanford, I came to see that people fly from all over the world to visit Stanford and find out what our secret recipe is. How does Stanford get to be Stanford? And how does the relationship between Stanford University and Silicon Valley's remarkable regional economy work? They do not go to San Jose State University, Foothill College, De Anza College, Everest University. They don't go to the 103 other colleges and universities in the Bay Area that are not Berkeley and Stanford. But I'll tell you what, Berkeley and Stanford are the products of decades of investment, essentially unregulated, multi-billion-dollar investments in higher education generally, in the state of California in particular, and in the United States. If you invest tens of billions of dollars with almost no conditions for several decades, and you spread that investment out over 4,200 universities, you wake up one morning and have 10 or 20 of the best universities in the world. Right? It's probably not, in a scarce resource kind of 21st century, it's probably not the best, most effective way to build world-class universities. But I and my colleagues at Stanford inherit those decades of largesse. So don't let yourself be tricked into thinking that the universities you've heard of are the US higher education system. They're a tiny minority of that system. And that tiny minority is by and large going to be just fine in the changing political economy of US higher education. It's the other 4,150 schools that you haven't heard of that are experiencing dramatic shifts in how they're funded and regulated. As I said earlier, the United States invested very, very luxuriantly in US higher education during the Cold War. It's no accident that we made that investment at precisely the same time that we were not building Northern European-style welfare states. Right? We don't have welfare in the United States, quote unquote. We have freeways, subsidized home mortgages, and higher education. Higher education was part of the welfare project of the United States in the 20th century, but it was welfare by a different name. And it's only since the end of the Cold War that American social scientists have really been able to kind of see how prominent higher education investment was in the sort of welfare portfolio of US higher education. The owl of Minerva only flies at dusk. And it's dusk for the Cold War University, which was, again, funded in large measure through government largesse, and was essentially unregulated by states. So we essentially gave those funds to university leaders and their faculties, and essentially told them to tell us what kind of higher education we were going to get. A clear example of that in the United States is the essentially unmeasured contents of the undergraduate bachelor's degree. Right? We let Stanford University and San Jose State University tell us what their degree represents. We don't, the federal government and the state of California don't ask Stanford to specify competencies that are associated with its bachelor's degree. In comparison with the way in which we now essentially take for granted that K through 12 education must be systematically assessed and measured in terms of learning, we've just begun to even entertain the possibility of asking places like Stanford to measure learning in their undergraduate programs. So huge, unregulated, and over the course of the last 20 years, gradually shrinking government support on infrastructure. And I want to be very clear on this. The United States continues to invest, federal government continues to invest very heavily in research programs in US universities, and they invest very heavily in supporting student tuition with subsidy. So the way the US system works is the system has always been a market system. We've never had a federal higher education system. And it's always been a competitive marketplace all the way back from the founding of Harvard University. You want to start a college, you can start a college. Get a board, find an endowment, build a building, issue diplomas, get some students, good luck to you, right? That's how we got, well, that's another long story, but it's always been a competitive market system. And beginning in the 1960s, the federal government essentially underwrote that system by putting tuition dollars in students' pockets and then allowing students to take those dollars to any institution they wanted as long as that institution was accredited. But accreditation is a very soft governance structure, okay? It's essentially a gentleman's agreement that says, I think your degree is okay, and you think my degree is okay, and every 10 years, I fly to your campus and you buy me dinner and I type up these big fat binders that talk about your milestones and give you some goals, and then you say thank you very much, and then next year you fly to my campus and make another fat binder and we pay the accrediting agency a couple $100,000 and we're done, okay? It's a gentleman's agreement, essentially, and one that probably is not sustainable at this moment, but in any case, a privately regulated sector is what I'm talking about. And I will keep a close eye on the time because I want to be sure that we have plenty of time for discussion. So I am going to plan to finish my remarks between 3:50 and 3:55, okay? And please interrupt me at any point. Is this too loud for you guys in the room? Okay, all right, because I'm hearing, it seems a little loud to me, but again, I feel like I'm on television and live at the same time, but I guess that is what's going on. Unregulated, gentleman's agreement. Oh, okay, so we've continued to invest in research programs, and we've continued to invest in in student tuition support, but we haven't built public infrastructure capacity in the United States for about 20 years. So we haven't expanded the number of seats in classrooms on public university campuses with state or federal government money for a couple of decades. Instead, we've given more money to more tuition support to more people and sort of push them into the same infrastructure that we've had for a generation, resulting in a phenomenon that some colleagues, economists Sarah Turner and John Bound, call cohort crowding, in which we're essentially asking the same organizations to do more work. And it turns out, in terms of undergraduate education, and that's what I'm talking about today, by the way, I'm not talking about the research capacity of US higher education. This has had deleterious effects on university persistence and graduation because people can enroll in the university, but they can't get the courses that they need for their major, so they slow down or take other courses. They don't get adequate advising, so they don't know how to find their way through the organizational time and space of their university. they can get into the class, but the class meets at 11 o'clock on Tuesday mornings, and they have children at home and they're working part-time, so they really can't take another day off. So they don't take the class that they need. Or they take the day off, but they don't have a car because their husband uses the car to go to work in San Mateo. So it can't really, so for reasons like this, one, the no new capacity in post-secondary education on the public side, and then the changing character of people's lives, right? So the more people enter higher education in the United States, the more often they come with life obligations that we do not have the welfare infrastructure to accommodate, like childcare, elder care, public transportation. So we're getting steadily increasing access and entry to college, but stable or declining persistence and completion over time. That's a secular trend. That's been going on for a couple of decades. Simultaneously, there's been unabated cost escalation in the sector. So the cost of college, the official price of college in the United States, and remember, people pay for college in the United States, right? It's not free. It hasn't been free for a generation. It approximates free in a net cost way because of the federally subsidized grants and loans that we put into students' pockets, but there is a tuition that goes through a household. The cost of college, or the price, let's say the price of college, has steadily risen faster than the rate of inflation for 2 decades. Such that the so-called sticker price of especially an elite university degree is positively staggering. The full tuition, board, and fees at Stanford University is close to $60,000 US dollars per year. The actual cost, average cost, is considerably lower than that because Stanford is wealthy enough to provide a great deal of financial aid. But the official price is about $60,000 US dollars. That doesn't even cover the total cost of educating an undergraduate at Stanford University. There's those 8,000 acres and science labs and palm trees and water polo teams, and it's a lot to cover. Ha ha ha. Nevertheless, even if Stanford were charging full tuition for everybody, it still is enjoying tax-exempt status from the federal government. So we have this unabated cost escalation throughout the sector, which is certainly a problem for students and their families. Student loan debt in the United States topped $1 trillion US dollars in the past year. There is more student loan debt in the United States than there is consumer credit debt, suggesting a business model that is essentially unsustainable for individuals and their families in a macro sense. But at the top of the system, like at the places where I work, there's also a non-trivial potential legitimacy problem, where by what's regarded as the best higher education in the United States is extraordinarily expensive, and that cost is essentially silently underwritten by the federal government, either in the form of federally subsidized grants and loans or through the various tax exemptions that I've talked about. So part of what's going on is a sort of moment in the financing of higher education that's essentially unsustainable in the United States. Couple that with the accountability revolution that has rolled through K-12 education globally and has now come to higher education, by which I mean the now taken for granted notion that we ought to systematically measure learning as students move through the organizational time and space of school, right? That we no longer simply trust schools to do the work that they say they're doing in an unmeasured way, but that, and this of course is part of a larger accountability, this is part of a larger shift in the organization of modernity, essentially, right? From a sort of a chartered presumption of professional authority to one in which all public organizations are expected to somehow systematically measure what they do. Some people call it neoliberalism. I call it modernity 2.0, but there's no getting around it, essentially. And that that transformation has come to higher education. The open question is what higher education will do with the accountability imperative, because the kinds of expertise and prestige that are associated with universities in your country and mine make it an open question how leaders of our universities will negotiate this rising tide of obligation to measure. Okay? So that's political economy of higher education in the US 101, all right? And that is the condition under which about 3 years ago, a handful of computer scientists in Stanford School of Engineering started messing around with their undergraduate classes. Messing around with their undergraduate classes. Why do I teach a room full of 600 undergraduates twice a week in a dark auditorium at Stanford and then expect people to go home and digest what they're teaching, what they're learning? Why don't I lecture to the camera and have students watch the lecture like homework in their dorm rooms, and then they can come to class and talk about the material instead? Oh, okay. Well, then maybe when I'm doing that, why don't I have some discussion questions that are associated with the lecture that the students can do as homework, and then I can machine grade those responses and get some sense of what's working and what's not working? That'll work. And then maybe I could crowdsource questions that the students might have in advance of class, and I could see what kinds of questions sort of bubble up to the top of the queue, and then I could target our weekly instruction around those specific questions. No problem. I'm a computer engineer. I can do this literally after dinner, right? I mean, I can write a web page that'll do this. For me. I mean, these are amazing people. Amin Saberi, who just spun off Venture Lab, which is a beautiful platform for distributed learning. He wrote the core program with a couple of doctoral students over the summer, right? In this last summer, right? So this sort of extraordinary capacity, and people who had done remarkable things with their capacity, like engineer the driverless car. That was Sebastian Thrun's most recent project. He took all that capacity and he shifted it to undergraduate instruction. And guess what? These engineers saw a pretty inefficient production and delivery model. And they started messing around with it. It was Sebastian Thrun, Daphne Kohler, Andrew Eng, Jennifer Wydam, who's chair of the computer science department, John Mitchell, who is now the vice provost of online learning at Stanford. That was a position that was created 8 months ago. And what shifted there was not necessarily that these computational engineers, now they did not invent online higher education. Online higher education has been under development for 25 years. In your part of the world and mine, there are whole institutions in the United States that have re-engineered their operations around online delivery. Arizona State University is probably the best example. But people hadn't heard of them because the extraordinary vastness of the US higher education system meant that if you worked at a place like Stanford or NYU or Berkeley, you essentially lived in this tiny elite world that was completely enclosed in itself, right? And you didn't see this huge terrain where the cost model was shifting and business as usual was getting harder and harder to sustain. So the computer science department at Stanford did not invent online higher education, but they overnight shifted the knowledge politics of online higher education. It went from being a peripheral thing that low-status universities did to a central priority of the most prestigious universities in the world. Online higher education almost overnight became something called ed tech, right? And it was the coolest thing going. The Board of Trustees loved it. The president and the provost loved it. The computer science department loved it. And some of these, this being Stanford, some of these engineers were closely connected to Silicon Valley venture capital. Daphne Kohler's husband is a venture capitalist. So it was only a matter of time before Silicon Valley private capital made a cognitive shift and saw in online educational delivery vast global markets for the kind of services that happen fairly routinely at firms like Facebook or Twitter or you name the one you want, LinkedIn, Amazon, Google, right? All of that informational technology capacity couples with, sort of starting to see educational delivery as a product domain. And that was another enormous cognitive shift. So what that meant is that essentially the knowledge politics of higher education in the United States changed virtually overnight. And that's why we have a new Vice Provost of Online Learning. That's why the Vice Provost of Online Learning and the Dean of the Graduate School of Education appointed me to this new position. And that's why I go to sleep every night asking myself, what will happen next? Right? Maybe the Secretary General of VINNOVA will invite me to Stockholm to talk with university leaders from all over a national state at the apex of modernity. And then maybe on Monday, I'll go to Helsinki. So now we're all sort of living through, I would suggest, an extraordinarily turbulent moment and if in higher education. And if you are not paying attention to this, you are paying attention to the wrong thing. This is only going to get larger. It's only going to get more disruptive. It's only going to change more rather than less of business as usual in higher education globally. You can get there a little earlier than another country or another office. You can get there a little bit more intelligently than another country or another agency. You can shape that future a little bit more decisively or not, but you cannot avoid this shift. It will change everything in its path. The good part is it's thrilling. All right. So here's part 2, and I see the time. I wasn't even going to do, I'll be honest, I'm going to the Stockholm School of Economics tomorrow, and they asked for slides. So I actually prefer to sort of break the tyranny of PowerPoint in having these discussions because I really do want to convey a sense of urgency. There's the most important thing I can encourage you to do is just pay attention. What's your name back there? Yeah, do what Peter does. Do twice as much as what Peter is doing, and you might be going fast enough. And the title that they sort of gave me was "Learning in the Digital Era," and then I thought, well, so I was working on them this morning, and then sometimes when you're working something out, you realize, oh, maybe there's something to that. But I'm saying this, I've never given these slides before. Okay, so we'll just see how it goes. And I'll do this in a very brief period of time. And I'm shifting now in my last 7 or 8 minutes to the intellectual and scientific opportunities that are afforded by this moment. Okay, so I gave you a sense of where this came from and why it's going to go really fast. And now I want to give you a sense of the extraordinary scientific opportunities that we have. All right, learning in the digital era. What is the revolutionary change? You think about what you think I'm gonna say, and maybe you'll be right. The revolutionary change is a shift from education to learning. Education is organizationally and institutionally based. It's structured into the time and space of adulthood in a particular way. It is primarily the responsibility of national governments. It begins and it ends. It occurs in incremental chunks that have a time-space component to them. That's not going away. Education is not going away anytime soon. But there's a massive sort of cognitive, phenomenological shift away from a focus on building education and improving it and toward learning as a distinctively valuable social process. Okay? So we're not replacing one with the other. We're adding learning onto an infrastructure that is not going to go away anytime soon. What do I mean by learning? Learning is learner focused. It's about how I would say student, but student is an organizational category that's tied to education bureaucracies. You're only a student relative to a particular organization. A learner learns all sorts, learns in any context, okay? Learning, so we've shifted from a focus on schools and their improvement to learners and their projects of learning. Learning occurs everywhere. Education happens in schools or school-like organizations. Education happens in schools. Learning happens anytime and all the time. Education happens between the ages of 3.5 and 22 if you stay on time and make annual yearly progress, right? And make the appropriate educational transitions, right? And get spat out by the machine at the end, at the proper time. Learning happens over the entire life course. You never stop learning. Never stop learning. In the 20th century, we supported the expansion of schools to further the project of education, which we defined as central to the architecture of modern democratic societies. It's a really good story. We had a really good story about what education was for in the 20th century, right? There's a massive shift from the support of education to the support of learning. How do you support learning? Well, you presume that learning is widely distributed across a great variety of platforms, objects, and contexts. Some of it happens in universities, some of it happens in the grocery store, some of it happens on Facebook, some of it happens while you're running, right? Learning, the support of learning is only partly an enterprise of states and can be only partly governed by them. Learning cannot be controlled by national states. It cannot be entirely regulated by national states. You're never going to get your hands around this thing. It's always going to be bigger than a national state. It's very attractive to profit-seeking enterprises of all kinds because it happens all the time. Over the entire life course, you never stop doing it. It can happen, it can be delivered by anybody. Right? Enormous opportunities for making money. And it requires, in fact, a new science. I'll do this really fast, Charlotte. Okay. But I want you to hear this part. But you already heard it too, but I get it. Okay. Then it's a new science, and it's epistemologically distinct from the social science of education we built in the 20th century. By which I mean the social science that we inherit was really a social science organized to support national states in the project of education. And we did that really well. And we did it epistemologically. We created a whole science that looked like this. This is one of the most famous pictures in the history of social science. This is Peter Blau and Otis Dudley Duncan's path diagram from 1967 of the relationship between father's education, I'm sorry it cut off, father's education and father's job in time 1, and son's occupation in time 2, okay? And this was done with nationally representative data sets that were newly becoming available to the best social scientists in the world who might have access to a mainframe computer at some place like the University of Wisconsin or the University of Michigan, where the federal government had dumped hundreds of millions of dollars in social science research to show us, are you sitting down? Are you ready for this finding? Okay. Son's occupation is significantly related to father's education and father's occupation. But that relationship is mediated by the amount of education that the son has. Wow. What do you know? Right? Now, that was not a huge intellectual insight. It was a huge scientific insight because because we were able to essentially statistically demonstrate over and 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 over again that schooling intermediated the relationship between class background and the life chances of children. And it worked different ways in different societies, and you could do, the inputs would vary, and but a great deal of educational social science is essentially a variant of this path diagram, okay? And that path diagram was built with individual level data of aggregated cohorts of individuals. Are you ready for this? Who we presumed were moving through the time and space of school as independent entities, right? Our statistical models required that Mitchell and Charlotte not be analyzed as moving through school in any way related to each other, even if we were sitting in the same classroom and gossiping about the same boys and girls, right? This model required that that Charlotte and Mitchell had to be autonomous individuals moving through the time and space of school. The statistics don't work unless you make that presumption. But we swallowed really hard, right, and allowed ourselves to get away with that because this was essentially the kind of science that was possible for schooling. Well, now we're starting to think about learning like that. And this, by the way, is this is not famous. This is a network picture of a colleague's Facebook friends, but it could be anything. I mean, it could be students in a school. It could be schools as organizations. It could be what my colleagues in the learning sciences call learning objects that are assembled variably into a curriculum. It could be the relationship between cognate structures in a particular learner's head. Right? The point is, we are now able, by virtue of digital technology, to capture enough data that enable us to fairly routinely model movement through any kind of learning trajectory on an individual level. We can imagine how to mathematically describe learning processes or educational processes, if you want, in a networked way. Well, this is a frontier for social science globally, let alone education science. And the people who are going to be moving fastest to build it at present are probably proprietary interests. So essentially what Google did for search is under construction in Silicon Valley for learning, right? How will data of the sufficient kinds and varieties be aggregated that enable us to develop models, network models of learning that will enable us to constantly improve what we're doing. Venture capital funded network research will probably get there. It's not might get there first. All right, so the race is on essentially. Whose learning science will it be? Will it be a private proprietary learning science that's funded largely by proprietary entities like Coursera and Google? Or will it be an academic science that's produced at least in part as a public good? It's up to us. What does this new science of learning look like? I told you it's epistemologically distinct from the science of education we built in the 20th century. It's only now under construction. It is now under construction. It started it actually has a longer history. It has a long history, but it's been given serious analytic attention only in the last couple of years. Or the scale of analytic attention that it's been given has shifted very rapidly. It must, and then now I'm going to get normative on my last two bullet points. If you ask me, and if you ask Stanford, this new science of learning has to be globally and contextually distributed. It can't, if we're going to build this learning science, we can't just do it with Stanford students. We can't just do it with 18-year-old students. We can't just do it with Americans, and we can't just do it in California because we would get a warped conception of what learning looks like if we don't have as cosmopolitan a data foundation as possible. So this is the normative point number one, is that it has to be globally and contextually distributed. And I'm almost finished. That it must be, I would say, it must be defined primarily by academic values and built as a global public good. Right? I think at present there are 3 entities who can assemble the capacity that's needed to define this science in the short term, at least as far as I know. It's Harvard, MIT, Coursera, and Stanford's emerging effort to build a globally distributed partnership for this kind of work. I think between the depth of capacity in the cognate fields of education and computational science at Stanford and the depth of capacity that we have in Silicon Valley and the Bay Area, and the frothy excitement of the business people in the region, and our eager ambition to do this in a distributed and partnered way, I think we have a fighting chance of doing something to define this landscape. That's why I'm here. I'm done. Ooh. Can we do this? Can we do this later? Do we have till 4:30? We do? So we can do this a little later? Okay, good. All right, good. No, okay, good. I don't want to make any presumptions or anything. Sure, I think so. And I understand people may need to leave too, so that's fine too.
Is it on? Okay. Thank you for a very extremely interesting lecture. It raises a number of questions, I think, for me at least. I have 2, but I take one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is related to the political economy of universities. Do you think this trend or this motion that you're talking about will have any implications for the attractivity of individuals actually locating their lives to the United States or to California or nearby the universities? It seems to me that, you know, the fact that you had to locate yourself to the education place has actually served an important role as an attractor for the US of talent. Would it have any implications that this would now be disconnected or more disconnected to space in the future? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we know there were winners and losers in that. There are winners and losers in the global integration of student flows, right? I mean, Australia wins, Norway loses, so I've learned, right? California wins, Michigan loses. Okay, the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor is every bit the university that Stanford is. It just happens to be in Detroit, Michigan, right? So it's hard to imagine that this won't have spatial implications. It's hard to imagine that it won't. I would not venture to predict what consequences it will have. Because we could tell stories in both directions. One could say that essentially, as a colleague of mine at New York University says, what digital does is it re-territorializes higher education. It's like a whole new landscape. It doesn't replace the one that we've inherited. It exists alongside it. But one could see that sort of pulling people, making people more physically cosmopolitan, or it could make people more physically parochial. I'm not sure. It'll probably do a little of both. It's fun to think about. A great thing for geographers to describe, right? I mean, you could sort of take a time zero and sort of, it's a great problem. Are you a geographer? Oh, okay.
What do you foresee as an implication for those 4,000 universities in the US that are not MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, etc.? And what do you see as a global competition between universities?
Well, the first question is a really, really sobering question. Again, I don't think we can predict. The reason we can't predict is because a lot of people are reading Clayton Christensen now on disruptive innovation in this sector. There are like 4 people you should be paying attention to. We all should be paying attention to. Clayton Christensen is one. William G. Bowen, who's former president of Princeton University. You can tell me who I should pay attention to as well. And former president of the Mellon Foundation, from the people who brought you JSTOR, the journal support platform. He totally gets it, and he's a good reader here, good person to follow. Clayton Christensen. I mean, the business model says that all of those other providers close because they can't really compete. They can't really compete with, now that Stanford can offer a version of itself for pennies in people's bedrooms, right? But the thing is, but colleges and universities are not businesses. They're state entities most of the time, and when they're not state entities, they're essentially cooperatives with thick, deep roots in particular regions. So I think we will see a good deal of closure and shrinkage, and I think schools, lower status schools, will become conveyors of other organizations' content. I would say I've just been starting to think about this. The big losers are, I would guess, it's just a guess, but a fateful part of, oh my gosh, I realize I'm saying it for the record, are going to be faculty who imagine themselves as primarily researchers at middle-tier universities, because their organization of their own careers is structured around doing research rather than delivering instruction. And I think that the ability of many universities to support their faculty in doing research programs independently of instruction, it's going to be a really hard thing to sustain. It's just going to start looking like a luxury that we at the University of X can't afford. So I think that's big. And for global competition, boy, who knows? Who knows? I think my sense is that the challenge will be for schools to realize that there's a whole new landscape, and then to think about investing very strategically in what their own institution or system can do. I'll say one more thing about that. Essentially, Coursera, has Coursera come to visit you guys yet? Have you, or has anyone, Swedish universities, have they been talking? Do they have any Swedish partners? No. You should talk to them. I would encourage you to have a conversation with Daphne or Andrew, and invite them here. Don't sign a contract. I'm not saying you should sign a contract with them. You might decide to sign a contract with them, but I'm not trying to send business their way. But I would try to talk with them, because they're very smart, capable people. I see her. the reason I said, what Coursera is offering now to the world is essentially an online solution for worried rectors, right? Like, what's my online strategy? Oh, I know, it's 4 courses on Coursera, right? So it sort of is offering a sort of package deal to people. But that's, I would say, the future of how the global ecology of delivery plays out is almost impossible to predict. Yeah.
So I think I have 2 questions.
Yes.
But maybe related in one way or another. But first, you said that in the future there will still be education. And will that be more limited to certain areas or circumstances, and or in general? That's one question. And another question is that when we have this learning, the new learning ways and so on, will it eventually end up in a global, very unified learning culture?
On the second one,
who knows?
I mean, I think it is. I mean, and the reason it's a who knows is because, I mean, it really is amenable to complexity insights. It's just, there's too many moving parts. I mean, we just can't predict what this is going to look like. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. 12 months ago, I don't think this learning science story existed. I think there was, I mean, at least not with the same prominence that it has now. So, it's really hard to predict. I want to hear more about your first question, though. I don't understand it.
You mentioned when you start to talk about learning that you also have education, and even and that you will have also in the future. But will it be limited to certain areas, or will it be in all areas? And when will education be the most important thing, and when will learning?
I get it. I hear you. Maybe we could collect a bunch of questions and comments. Is that maybe just might be a more efficient? I don't want to. I mean, I've talked so much. Let's get as many voices as possible, and then we can sort of see where things cluster, and I can respond. Yeah, go ahead.
I believe I have 2 questions too. My first question is really, what will happen with the business model for a university? Will an online degree, will a university charge an online degree as much as for a physical degree? And my second question is really, when I listen to you, I get the impression that you say that, okay, essentially the majority of the universities will be replaced by virtual universities, right?
I didn't know. I wouldn't say that.
But we were talking about the 4,200 universities that will be obsolete somehow, or colleges.
I'm doing this kind of for fun, right? I didn't quite say that.
No,
right?
But I'm sort of interpreting what you said. So.
Right.
but I mean, isn't it more to learning than only the virtual dimension? Isn't it more
only the what dimension? Sorry.
The virtual dimension.
Oh,
I mean, we still have laboratories, so we have physical meetings, discussions, and seminars on an interactive basis. Okay, some of it can be replaced by using the internet, but I don't think all of it can be replaced. So I think it would be more about quality. It would be good to hear what you think about.
I'm collecting. Yes.
This with learning by yourself has been going on for many, many years because you go to the library or whatever. Right. So now we have a new media where the learning it's possible for learning. So how do you move from information collection to learning? That means that that is the individual person that needs to do some activity. Otherwise, it's just collection of a lot of information. So my question is really related to that. How can we in the future make the activity going on with the people around the world sitting at their home, in their bedroom or whatever? So we end up with a lot of information traveling around in the virtual and
here we are.
Yeah, we are here.
Right. Great. More? Yes.
You talk about a relation change, a shift from education to learning, and you say that 12 months ago, you don't think the learning science exists. But for me, the learning science is not a new thing because, as I said before, I'm a senior lecturer in education, and my PhD is about lifelong learning. So for me, it's not
fair
a new
enough.
thing.
Keep going.
So I want to ask you if do you see some difference between the USA and Europe or Scandinavia?
Do I see difference in
How you see of education and learning and so on? Because when I read about lifelong learning and adult education, I see that you see different on adult education than we did in Sweden and so on. So.
Say more about that.
In the US, I think that adult education is how you have to. I don't know how to explain
That's
this.
Fine.
How in Sweden is more how I as an adult learn, but in the US it's more how I have to learn adult something. It's a big difference, but
say it one more time. I have to learn it in the context you're describing here is
how people learn.
How people learn. Okay.
Yes. And in the US it's more how I, as a teacher, have to learn adult people.
I see. Okay, I think I just wanted to be sure I was getting the picture. Okay, thank you for that. Let me start with that. It's very good critique. It helps me understand and that it's not that these ideas are new. It's not that learning as opposed to education is a new conceptual distinction, and it's not that, and you have corrected me wisely, it's not like we woke up yesterday and decided we needed to build a new science of learning, right? However, the political and financial and frankly public relations conditions under which we're talking have all shifted. So what used to be a modest part, say, of the United States science portfolio on learning and schooling, right? The learning sciences were this thing that happened over way at the margins of the National Science Foundation, is now sort of central to the research and political project of the U.S. Department of Education, right? So it's the game has shifted, and things that were peripheral are now central. The other thing that has shifted is that there are whole new players involved. So, you know, MacArthur Prize-winning computational engineers, weren't doing learning science very often, but now we have people, not only Daphne Kohler and the people I mentioned before, but Carl Wyman, who's a Nobel Prize-winning physicist at the University of British Columbia, who has been devoting his recent years to improving undergraduate science instruction worldwide. We're trying to recruit him to Stanford. At present, I think we'll succeed in that. So attention is being paid to ideas and by parties who just weren't there before. Is that a problem or an opportunity? I'd say for you and me, it's a huge opportunity, right? On the education part, the reason, one way to say education isn't going to go away, it's too deeply institutionalized. It's simply too baked into the organization of modern societies to go away, even if some of my more utopian Northern California friends might sort of think that it should. And I think that's, and how the fact of that deep institutionalization is going to interact with this whole new ecology is the big open question. I think, and this will be related to what you guys were talking about too, an intellectual opportunity is for us to specify as learning researchers, what is co-presence good for? We know it's good for something. We also know it's really expensive. And if we could only afford, say, 30% of what we're currently offering, right? Or say we want to cut off we want to get rid of 25% of the cost of university, right? What should we cut? And what should we keep? So if we think about co-presence as a kind of treatment, we're going to have the opportunity to specify in much greater detail what it's a treatment for. And I think that the physical co-presence is valuable. We just haven't been asked to parse it in the ways that we have. So that's one thing. In the United States, I think what will keep remember that I live in a country in which the best schooling is presumed to be a 24-hour, we feed you, we house you, we do everything except your laundry kind of model. And that has deep intellectual as well as political roots in the United States, and frankly, it's central to the organization of marriage and fertility markets in the US. So that's essentially how the upper classes reproduce and reintegrate themselves in the United States. So, you know, Harvard College is not going to go away. But will the University of Akron, Ohio's, you know, fully residential undergraduate programs too? So, I mean, some of the core will hold, I think, for various sort of virtuous as well as perhaps less virtuous reasons. But how, and how much of that you need, I think, is going to be very much reorganized. Yes. Did you want to follow? Oh, right. All right. Right. Your fans can't hear you.
I was also thinking about age. I mean, younger and older people and so on. I mean, children, is it education versus learning and so on?
Well, so here's another, I mean, it's like, it's hard to imagine, here's another way, a deep way in which schooling as we education is baked in. I mean, you know, that's how we organize childhood and labor force participation of adults. I mean, you can't just take that away without moving everything else around. Although, I do think one great opportunity, it's both an intellectual opportunity for learning researchers, and I think it has it's normative opportunity as well. Can we, my colleague Richard Setterston at Oregon State writes about this, and also a colleague of mine, Mike Hout, who's at UC Berkeley, he's a demographer who claims that we waste a lot of college on young people, right? Could we pull out college, university over a longer period of the life course and sort of dose it more sporadically as people's lives and needs and even psychosocial development unfolds, right? I mean, why do we cram it all together in 3 to 4 years at age 19? You know, maybe there's a more efficient and frankly kinder way of offering university to people over a longer period of time and space. Who didn't I get to, or other comments or questions? Peter?
You mentioned briefly studying the research, going into this area of studying how learning takes place. One of the courses that I follow, prior to every week, they ask all the 100,000 students a questionnaire that it's important that you take prior to the week, engaging in that topic. So it's a way of actually accumulating original research while running the course. Could you just expand a little bit on the research topics that we are interested in studying? That's one of them. And this is the Duke course in behavioral psychology, so it makes sense for them to ask me how I would behave in a certain situation. So it's topically relevant to them, but in different subjects it will be a different story.
That's great. That's great fun. And here I'm going to do a little, I don't know, sort of brand burnishing, shall we say, because I am really excited about Stanford's capacity to grow here. So one of the people we're on the I mentioned Carl Wyman from UBC. One person we're on the verge of hiring is a woman named, can I write on this? Yeah, right. Candace Till. And she is the principal architect of a beautiful piece of engineering called, that you might look into, called the Open Learning Institute or Initiative, I can't remember. OLI.org. It's at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. Has anyone heard of Open Learning Initiative before? Peter has. You have. You have. Okay, good. Great. A lot of people haven't heard of the Open Learning Initiative because it's in Pittsburgh and because it's not a MOOC. It's kind of the opposite of a MOOC, actually. It's but it offers, for 12 years, Candace has been developing what is probably the world's most impressive artificial intelligence-based online instructional material. In 12 years, OLI has produced 16 courses. Right? These are works of art. They're not beautiful visually, the design. She needs a good designer. We'll help her with that when she moves to San Francisco. Or maybe you guys could help with that. You guys can help with a lot of things. When you take the OLI Introduction to Statistics, every keystroke that you make is semantically coded. And the interface iterates feedback to you in real-time instant customization. Right? It knows the mistakes you're going to make before you make those mistakes. And it aggregates all of those data in real time and feeds them back to the instructor on a dashboard. So she knows who is doing what, when, not where, maybe what terminal they're on. They're thrilling. They're simply thrilling, and the work is not designed to replace face-to-face instruction. It essentially supports the instructor in face-to-face activity. This is the huge opportunity, not only for research but also for educational improvement, because in the 20th century you had to pilot something, and then you had to give it a nationally representative sample, and then you had to get modest statistical effects, and then you had to scale up, and then you had to wait a year until the test results came back, right? Right? And this is, oh, well, what happened yesterday in class? Oh, okay, well, why don't we try it this way with 50,000 students and this way with 49,000, see what happens. And we'll throw it away the day after tomorrow if it doesn't work. So, huge.
So is there a bridge from your last sentence there to the process that we will engage in Sweden in terms of getting to understand this? Can we be strategic for 3 years and think about it and get a grand plan and then go full ahead, or do you?
Oh no, I'd start right now. I'd start. I mean, there are universities that offer. You have entities that offer online instruction, correct? Yeah. Well, they're probably doing some components of this already. So I know this is not easy. I know you don't just do this overnight, but you could start tomorrow. You could start to. Should I use my last couple of minutes to talk about what would you like? More questions? More comments? Okay.
I have a question which may be related anyway to one of the last ones too, questions that we had before about business models for universities. If you have any things to say, I'm an economist, but political economist.
Some of my best friends are economists.
Okay, I have a sociological kind of angle to it too. But what do you think about the incentive structures from a political perspective to universities, since we're funding quite a lot from direct state funding? If maybe you have to decide on what to reward in this system in order to get things happening. It's about the business model, I think. What was taken up was what are the students going to pay for? What is the state going to reward? What I think has been rewarded is pieces of education, maybe, rather than pieces of
learning.
Or bits of learning. And what would be in it, and how would a politician think in order to get things moving? Because they wouldn't move by themselves, or some would move by themselves, or Stanford would do it all for us.
No, you know, I can't do that.
How would a Swedish government think in a way, if you are giving advice to the Swedish government in this case?
So here's how I'll answer the question. And I would say that I'd keep that question on the table. What I would do, what I hope you do, it'd be really good for me if you do this. I would hope that you frame this as a science problem, as a thrilling science problem. Like, this is a whole new research frontier. It's got a data analytic component, but it's going to have a qualitative classroom-based component as well. It's going to have an engineering and design component, because digital mediation requires the creation of whole new tools that engineers shouldn't be making all by them, that instructors shouldn't be making all by themselves. So frame it as a science problem or a science opportunity, and then also perhaps as an innovation sector opportunity, right? Make it be about seeding a whole, capitalizing on Sweden's deep reserves of human capital in important cognate areas, but encouraging its flourishing in this new domain. That's what you should do that first. That's a smiley face thing, right? That's the progress of knowledge. And then make friends in the, build partnerships in strategically located locations around the world. Commit to some kind of ongoing data sharing partnership with an entity that you trust. You essentially enter a data sharing partnership when you sign up with Coursera. You get all of your own data, but Coursera gets it all as well. Could there be possibilities for partnering with entities that you would want to invest with over the long term to build this science globally? And try to make this be a story about, try to make this be a happy story about the future of higher education, rather than a sad story about the decline of higher education as we built it in the last century. Because it's going to be painful for a lot of people. But I hope it will be painful for a lot of people. But there's enormous possibility too. So if we can sort of convey the upside, even as a lot of people are going to lose, I think we'll be well positioned.
Okay, we're close. We're about to. We're close to the end, aren't we?
You're on now.
So now you're on with our token of appreciation, and thank you very much.
My pleasure,
Professor Stevens, for an excellent lecture.
Well, thank you very much. It was very inspiring, and I learned very much new.
Shall I open it now? Yes. Yay! How did you know? How do you know that I'm a home person? How do you know that?
For the future, eh?
How do you know that? How do you know that I spend a great deal of time in my kitchen? How do you know that I'm thinking about putting some of these towels from the Hotel Diplomat into my suitcase? But now I have a beautiful reason to play by the rules. Thank you. And let me just give you a sense of what these are. Online.stanford.edu is just an overall view site of what we're up to. It's not the most beautiful thing in the world in terms of instructional delivery. It's a placeholder. This is thrilling. Lytics is thrilling. It's a group of doctoral students in education, computer science, and communications who are essentially feeding off the data exhausts that are being delivered through Coursera and stuff. Whole new world under construction. EDF.stanford.edu is called Education's Digital Future. It's a year-long conversation that I'm hosting in the Graduate School of Education. We update the site daily with good articles and Twitter feeds. This is an article that appeared in Nature recently about the new learning science that I think is pretty good. And you're all welcome to contact me anytime with a question or a good idea. It's been a pleasure to visit you. Thank you.